Howdy folks, welcome to a classic ranking video from yours truly, Yami Noob. Today we are looking at all major motorcycle manufacturers. I'm going to tell you which one's the worst and which one's the best, ranking all 11 of the major manufacturers for 2026. Now, I did omit a few manufacturers. We're not looking at Harley-Davidson or Indian because that's just not my lane. We're also keeping it to major manufacturers, as I mentioned. So we're not going to look at stuff like Arch Motorcycles or Zero or MV Agusta. Sorry to all the MV Agusta fans out there. And for today's video, I'm only looking at street and road-oriented motorcycles. So if a manufacturer has a lot of prowess in building off-road bikes, I'm not going to include that in my criteria for the ranking. So how did I think about which manufacturer is the best and which is actually the worst? So I have four criteria that I'm looking at. The first one is how wide is their product offering on the market? Do they have stuff for beginners, intermediate riders, returning riders, expert riders, and do they make anything that's more niche? The more wide their offerings, the more I'm going to rank them. Second, I'm looking at reliability and availability. So are the motorcycles up to the standard in 2026? Do they have problems? Do they have teething issues? And how readily available are they in the entire marketplace? Primarily looking at North America for today, since that's where I live. The third criteria was affordability, because that's pretty important in 2026. People are trying to buy motorcycles that are going to fit their budget and their pocketbook. So we're not just going to rank the most expensive motorcycle first, because that makes no sense, even if maybe it is the best. And we're also not going to rank them worst because, some people can't afford nicer toys, so that's just part of the equation. And last, more of an X factor is the manufacturer on the ascent or the descent? Is this a motorcycle manufacturer that's coming up in the rankings, making big waves and making big moves in the industry? Are they stagnating or are they declining? So with all that being said, let's kick it off with the worst manufacturer in 2026, in my humble opinion, and that would be KTM. KTM is such a problematic and strange manufacturer. Really, I think what happened here, it was a brand that just got a little bit too big for their britches. I really think KTM should have focused on building a more small, svelte, niche offering rather than trying to partner with Indian and Chinese giants and go for the big mass market thing without really understanding what they were doing. KTM's reliability has been almost infamous at this point with the camshaft issues, and now in MotoGP, the bike that Pedro Acosta and Brad Binder are on seemingly break every other weekend. I mean, it is such a hot and cold manufacturer that it is difficult to say that anybody is worse than them in 2026. Now, this is not me sort of dancing on their grave. I do not wish KTM any ill will. I'm just seeing that they are certainly fighting against the tides of the industry at the moment. But weirdly enough, they make some of my absolute favorite motorcycles. For example, the RC8C, their track-only special, that I feel like only KTM could build a motorcycle like that. That is one of the best track day motorcycles you can buy. And honestly, at $40,000, you might think that it's super expensive, but you're going to spend that kind of money building a bike that feels that way anyways. Why not just buy it from the manufacturer and you're pretty much done? You guys will know when I'm ready to retire and be done with YouTube, when you see an RC8C in my garage and I'm posting like one video a month. Then I'm like, all right, see you guys later. KTM is trying to make improvements through their Indian and Chinese benefactors. They've certainly launched a 4-year warranty on their bikes now. They are swearing up and down that they work. But again, until we see the proof in the pudding, I would steer clear from KTM in 2026. Let's move on to the next manufacturer. All right, number 10 on our ranking of the motorcycle manufacturers is going to be none other than BMW. Now, I already know you guys are thinking this list is completely biased and I hate BMWs. That's why I listed them down here. Don't worry, it's not going to be Ducati at the very top. I actually put a little bit of thought into this, and let me explain why BMW is so far down the list here. So BMW kind of finds itself in a weird place in 2026 where, in my opinion, it is a brand that offers pretty niche products, mostly for old guys who want to get into the whole GS thing, or squids who want to finance an S1000RR. They don't have a very well-developed pipeline in terms of entry-level, intermediate bikes, and you could say that's because BMW is a super luxurious brand and they don't need to focus on the entry-level or intermediate stuff. But we're going to see further up in the ranking that some brands are absolutely able to do this while still retaining an aura of premium and luxury and all the fun stuff that motorcycle manufacturers who want a bunch of high margins love to throw out there for us to enjoy. And it's interesting, you know, BMW has a lot of products that do really, really well for them. I mean, the entire GS line is probably, I would say, 50 to 60% of their business at this point. The S1000RR has done reasonably well in World Superbike, of course, with the hands of the alien talent that is Top Rack nowadays. The bike is certainly middle of the road because that's really where it should be. And with only 2 bikes on the grid, the rest of the privateer teams in World Superbike opting for the Ducati Panigale V4R, it kind of shows you that the bike is not as competitive as they'd like you to believe. BMW focuses mainly on large touring motorcycles, K1600s, the GS. Everything they build has a bit of a touring kind of vibe to it. Now, in terms of reliability and availability, BMWs are reasonably available. Many people stack up hundreds of thousands of miles on their GSs and other touring-based BMWs, but the thing that they're most known for is a bit more expensive maintenance, which makes them not as affordable, and also sensors and other electronics tend to fail more on BMWs than you'd see in Japanese products, for example. So similar to KTM, not nearly as bad. It's kind of like you got to know what you're getting into. You got to understand that this is a brand that, you know, you're going to buy these bikes. Some stuff may break, some weirdness may happen, but in general, they're built to go a very long distance. So if you want a premium touring style motorcycle, probably your best bet with this brand, but in general, for most people, this is not really a great brand to buy from. It's very expensive for what they really are. They're very like old man coated, very farkly, you know, the M package and everything else. Whenever you see the pricing for a new BMW, it's not even clear as to what the out the door total is really gonna be because they have so many different packages and add-ons and everything else. And you know, BMW is probably a hop, skip, jump away from trying to charge you monthly for your heated grips at this point too, because they did do that with their seats in their cars, and I don't see them not wanting to do that for the motorcycle stuff. So to me, it's an old man brand with a few squids who love the leader bikes, very limited appeal, very niche, and not very affordable, so I don't think it's a brand that's making a lot of waves. I don't really think they're on the come up either. I don't really see BMW doing anything super interesting or different. They're kind of staying in their lane, making the old man stuff, so that's where I see them. Whoa, 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 wait a minute, stop what you're doing. This R7 is a giveaway bike on my website, yammynoob.co. Click that link below and check it out right now because this Friday is the last chance you have to get entered to win. I've been doing these shorter sweepstakes, having a lot more fun with them, and it's way better for you too. Head over to the website, pick up a t-shirt, a hat, a hoodie. Every dollar you spend will be an entry to win subject to our multiplier, or you can become a member and instantly get your chances locked and loaded to win this motorcycle. Don't delay, don't miss it. This Friday is your last chance to win. Seriously. Click that link and get entered. All right, let's get back to the show. Next up is a manufacturer making a ton of waves. Let's talk about Royal Enfield, who find themselves 9th on the ranking today. Royal Enfield is the epitome of a slow and steady development and product cycle. They do not do stuff super quickly. You know, other manufacturers are going to talk about are launching new motorcycles every 6 months, trying new stuff, throwing it out there. Royal Enfield is slow and steady. It is a totally different philosophy with how they're running their business. To be honest, they have a pretty limited product offering. Royal Enfield is the super affordable, entry-level, authentic, air-cooled kind of brand who just now started branching out into liquid-cooled single cylinders with their Gorilla and their Himalayan lineup. But in general, this is a brand that fits really well for entry-level riders and some returning riders who just want something simple and clean and don't really want to break the bank. I mean, Royal Enfield's claim to fame to me is the fact that they sell a motorcycle that is about 80% as good as something from BMW or Triumph, but really at 50% of the price. That is the built-in value right there. In terms of reliability and availability, Royal Enfield had a massive turnaround in about 2017 when they launched the new Interceptor 650 and all those subsequent products. They totally revamped their product lines in India. And to be honest, whatever perspective you have of Royal Enfield, which I used to have, is really not accurate anymore. If you look at their production facilities and what they're doing in India, that is a totally modern, revolutionized way of making motorcycles, and they're only going to get stronger because they take all their products and just reinvest it back into that. The new bikes are built really, really well. They're pretty reliable and they're getting better all the time. It seems that because they take their time in developing their products, it's much more reliable than some of the other stuff we're going to talk about in today's video. In terms of availability and accessibility, Royal Enfield is sold all throughout North America, but of course, if you do live in India, that is like the brand there. You can fix them anywhere. That's kind of the claim to fame is, you can find parts for them at hardware stores. They're not very complicated machines, so in general, they'll do pretty well for you. They have excellent price points, cool availability in terms of colors, pretty decent model lineup. But again, because it's focused mostly on beginner and returning riders, the intermediate rider, the expert rider, the niche rider doesn't really have a lot that Royal Enfield can offer them. I think this brand is most certainly on the come up though. They are, every year posting 25, 30% year over year growth. They're showing super steady increases. I just think it's gonna take a really long time. I talked about this in some of my Royal Enfield deep dive videos we did with the Gorilla 450. I said that the 2030s will probably see maybe 2-3 new models from them, and maybe they'll do something in the big bike space, but maybe as a sub brand, kind of like a Toyota Lexus thing. But Royal Enfield is certainly one to watch. They are absolutely on the come up. I'm seeing them more and more. This is a brand that you really want to keep your eye on. But, for the general ranking for today, it's a little limited in what they offer. All right, next up is a brand that I know everyone is, you got opinions on them one way or another, and they are making the biggest splash in motorcycling now, without a doubt. It is CFMOTO, the new squid brand du jour, the new hot kid on the block. Everybody's talking about CFMOTO. They only make it 8th on the list today. Why is that? So CFMOTO is pretty notorious for their cheaper offerings. They'll sell you something that has LED light up sequences, a Brembo brake, a TFT, all this stuff, for a pretty suspiciously cheap price. And you're kind of thinking, where are they finding the margin? How are they selling this for so cheap? And they are, of course, a Chinese company backed by, theoretically, the Chinese government and the way that they do business over there. And honestly, the entire rise of CFMOTO and these Chinese brands, the way that they're changing, if you look at history, it is very similar to what the Japanese brands were doing in the 60s and then into the 70s, where they just started completely dominating. I think in about 4 or 5 years, maybe 10 at the very latest, there will just simply be a Chinese motorcycle lane in motorcycling, and we won't even think twice about it. We'll just say, oh yeah, just like there's Indian bikes and Austrian bikes and Japanese bikes, there's Chinese bikes. But right now, that stigma still exists and is very, very heavy with kind of like a political undertone and kind of an adversarial quality that comes with the Chinese stuff. But I will say, having studied stuff about CFMOTO, ZXMOTO, a lot of these Chinese brands, to be honest, a lot of it feels like propaganda in terms of making me want to hate these companies. And to an extent, CFMOTO, a lot of what they're doing, their passion for motorsports, their entire feeder series they have in MotoGP right now that pretty much primes them perfectly to jump onto the world stage. I think it's only maybe 2 or 3 years away from CFMOTO partnering with KTM and launching a CFMOTO MotoGP bike, which, for the average American, we love to think of ourselves as exceptional. Can you imagine Harley Davidson making a MotoGP bike? No, not even a little bit. And I mean, last year they sold 250,000 motorcycles. Ducati sold 50,000. Triumph only sold 140,000, right? So this is a brand that is on a ridiculous upswing right now. They have massive potential. And I think if they, they kind of fumbled a little bit with that subscription thing that they did last year, but I think they've got that sorted. I think they kind of took the understanding that people really don't want to be forced subscription packages for things. And you think that with their parent, partner company KTM, they try to do all that pay-to-play stuff, and it just doesn't play well with consumers. So they're reasonably reliable. I think their affordability is no question there. They're pretty readily available in the United States. Their dealer support network seems to be growing every year. They're growing a ton every year. Their product offerings right now, I would say, are certainly like beginner and intermediate. There's not a whole lot for the expert rider. There's not a whole lot for the niche rider, not a whole lot for like a returning rider, especially someone who has preconceived notions about Chinese motorcycles. So I'd say give this brand 5 to 7 years, let them flesh out their product offerings, start really nailing what they're all about, And I think we're gonna see some pretty serious stuff from CFMOTO. I am seeing more of them around where I live, in the twisties, and our local, hill country routes, all throughout town. I'm just physically seeing CFMOTOs more, and that tells you all you need to know. It's just anecdotal, but it's a vibes-based thing here, right? But they're gonna land 8th for today's video. Number 7, and hopefully proving that this video is not biased because you guys know this is probably my favorite brand, is Ducati. So Ducati, not even making podium places, not even top 5. How could I possibly place them in 7th place? Well, it's pretty simple. Ducati is Ducati. It's maximum emozione, maximum sport bike energy, maximum price tag usually. And to me, they're sort of like the Porsche of the motorcycling world in the sense that you should accept no substitute, that this is the sport bike brand. But with that comes a lot of added price, exclusivity, stuff that you don't have to deal with other brands. Like owning a Ducati is you signing up for the fact that it's probably gonna cost you 30 to 40% more for everything in terms of buying the bike, maintenance, costs, all this stuff. But I will say, all of their new stuff, if you just look at the 2026 product offerings, most of them are based on the new V2 engine. They are putting that thing into everything, and that thing is a spring valve, so no more Desmos. The electronics are pretty sorted. It's a pretty, standard engine, all things considered. It doesn't have really that much that's weird and Ducati about it. What's weird, though, is that Ducati doesn't really offer anything for beginners. There's some intermediate level stuff, but to be honest, most of the stuff they sell you is for someone who has a pretty deep pocketbook, wants expert level fit and finish and quality and refinement from their bikes, wants something with serious power, serious pedigree, serious panache. You look at the V4 products, the Multistradas, the Diavel, the Panigales, it's all super flagship stuff. Ducati makes dream bikes, right? So there is no way that I could say that they have a really broad product offering because that's not the type of company that they are, and that kind of limits them. Reliability has massively improved with Ducati pretty much ever since VW bought them back in 2009 or 10, whenever year that was, 2012. I don't remember exactly the year VW bought Ducati, but ever since the Germans got involved with their production, they've only gotten better, right? They've only gotten more reliable, they've only gotten simpler, they've only gotten a little bit more polished. And you could say, I often bemoan this. I'm like, Ducati's not really Ducati anymore, but at the end of the day, they still make the best sport bike stuff on the planet. I don't care what anybody says. I've tried everything from every brand. There is no comparing to Ducati at the moment. They make the best stuff. So if you want to go fast, especially on track, it's Ducati or nothing, in my opinion. In terms of affordability, as I mentioned, not really part of the equation when it comes to Ducati, and that's going to kind of drag them down in the rankings a little bit. And ultimately, I think Ducati's doing what they should be doing. I like that they're a niche brand. They're firing on all cylinders, no pun intended. They're making super competitive MotoGP bikes. They're competing in World Superbike. They're doing exactly what the mission statement of the company is. But unfortunately, I think for most people, that doesn't make a lot of sense to buy from them. Similar to BMW, right? Where I'm like, unless you're an old guy who wants to buy a touring bike, unless you're a well-heeled guy who just wants to buy something blisteringly fast for the racetrack, Ducatis don't really make a lot of sense. So they kind of fall in the ranking a little bit. All right, next up is another one of my very favorite brands. I actually own a bike from them. It is the Aprilias of the world, the Piaggio group, Aprilia. A lot of people consider Aprilia a very niche, bespoke, exotic manufacturer, but really they are much more normal and conventional than, say, Ducati. They have a lot of cost sharing and product bleedovers from the Piaggio group in general, so you'll see switch clusters from Aprilias on Moto Guzzi's and other products. They have a pretty broad product offering at the moment. They got stuff for beginners, for intermediate riders, for expert level riders. They have an adventure bike. It is a very narrow focused lineup. They only have like 4 or 5 different bikes, but I guarantee you they're gonna make something else and kind of leave the, I call it the intermediate plus category because the RS660 is kind of in a weird spot. But in general, these bikes are fantastic. Every Aprilia I've ridden is a lot of fun, really interesting. What holds them back is, of course, dealer availability and kind of the readily available qualities of Aprilias. If you need parts, sometimes they can take a long time. But again, as I mentioned in one of my recent videos, if you live in a major metro area, Aprilia is very accessible. In California, Texas, Florida, New York, if you live in one of the major metro areas in those places, which, I mean, that comprises like 140 million people, almost half the country. So in general, if you're already in like a higher cost of living area, there probably already is an Aprilia dealer near you and servicing for you. We have AF1 here in Austin that can, ship out parts all over the country in just a little as 2 to 3 days. More exotic stuff, you want body parts, fairings, all that stuff, that might take a little longer to get in, but you can eventually get it. In terms of reliability, similar to BMW, there's sometimes electronics issues, there's small quirks that comes to owning an Italian bike, but I mean, they'll sell you a 220 horsepower V4. I mean, not a lot of brands will do that for you. I think the price point is really solid for what you're getting. I wouldn't say it's affordable necessarily, because there's plenty of brands that do better, cheaper stuff. But in terms of what Ducati does versus Aprilia does, like, you can get a similar V4 Exotica feel for a lot less money at Aprilia. You can get a bike that feels European and exotic and Italian for not a whole lot of cash, which is pretty cool. I think that they are certainly on the come up. I mean, you see it in their MotoGP program. They're trickling down that racing knowledge. The bike is really damn good in MotoGP right now. Shout out to Ayagura, who I kind of hope wins the championship, because I just love his riding style so much. He's such a smooth operator on that bike. And I like what Aprilia is doing. I think they're doing a lot of cool stuff, but I understand that it's still a bit niche, still a bit not for everybody, not quite as affordable as it could be, and the product offering is still a little bit narrow. So in my estimation, probably gonna fall here in 6th place. Moving on. All right, first of the big four, you probably already know which one this one's gonna be. It is Suzuki, which finds itself 5th on the motorcycle manufacturer's ranked list. For a brand that I talk so much crap about in terms of their bikes not being interesting and being outdated dinosaurs and them not keeping up with the trends, at the end of the day, say what you will about Suzukis, you can get them anywhere and they're basically unkillable, which is what I think a lot of people like about them. There is a bit of a strange thing with Suzukis though, where people think that they're cheap, but Suzukis are actually not very cheap when you compare them to other brands. Like Suzuki will sell you a GSX-R 750, which is a bike that they paid the R&D for about 20 years ago. That bike is $13,000. A Yamaha R9 is $11,000 something for a new bike with new electronics, all this stuff. And people love to say, but they're built in Japan, they're built to a higher standard, they're super reliable. Suzuki has this like legendary, mythical kind of like brand cachet, which I can really appreciate, but it's kind of crazy how it clouds people's judgment a little bit. I think the thing is, like, it's hard to say Suzuki motorcycles don't do exactly what they say they're gonna do, and they're very much like no fuss, no muss. They're just like, you set it and forget it. They're very simple. They're not overly laden with crap. And honestly, their lineup is pretty interesting. They've got like big V-twins and little V-twins, which not many people do anymore. They'll sell you a new 270-degree parallel twin, which is pretty cool. They'll sell you that in various configurations. Their beginner bike lineup is virtually non-existent. They'll sell you the DRZ, but that's like so expensive for what it is, like $93.99 for that bike or something like that. That's crazy. That's like a $7,000 bike at best. I don't understand where they get $93.99 from that. A lot of their bikes are stuck in an old era, and some people really like that. They like this idea that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't ever change stuff. Don't change anything around. I personally think that philosophy is not really good. I like to see continuous improvement. I like to see changes. I like to see updates where things make sense. I like to see things getting better. I don't think that Suzuki has made the best motorcycle ever and should never change, which is some people's opinion about this brand. So they're readily available, super reliable. You can get them anywhere. Product offering, I wouldn't say limited. They make a lot of different stuff. I think their beginner stuff is not that great. Their intermediate stuff is varied. They have the GSX 8 platform. They have the 750s. They have the GSX-R 1000 that just came back to Europe as well, which everybody's super excited about. They'll sell you sport touring stuff, adventure stuff. So it's pretty wide, but at the same time, there's just weird gaps where you're like, that's not that great. You don't have anything in this category. You could be doing more in this one. And Suzuki, similar to Royal Enfield, a brand new Suzuki model, like brand new engine up, frame up, you get one of those nowadays every 15 years. Those are some very rare, occasion when we get a brand new Suzuki model. Like when we got the new parallel twin, it was like, whoa, there's a new Suzuki engine. Call up everybody, this is crazy. I think Suzuki is easily one of the most conservative brands, which is really funny because in the 90s and the early 2000s, they were one of the most crazy brands. They make the Hayabusa, the Supermotos, the SV650. They used to take a lot of risks and do cool stuff. I think at some point, Suzuki is going to have to be more cutting edge if they want to compete against the Chinese and the Europeans, and they can't just keep relying on the good old days and the good old times. At some point, you got to start ponying up for the present moment. All right, fourth on my ranking for today is Yamaha. And the rankings are getting a little phased off, but you kind of understand what's happening over there. Yamaha, of course, as you guys know by the channel name, was my first motorcycle brand. I have a definite kind of like love affair with them. I've always really enjoyed their stuff. To get the Valentino Rossi stuff from the mid-2000s. It's very romantic, cross-plane, R1, all that stuff, right? But it's hard to look at Yamaha now and not think that this is a manufacturer, I wouldn't say in distress, but one that is sort of losing their way a little bit. And I look at racing because that's obviously what I'm a big fan of, but it does tell you the ethos and the story of what the brand is doing. So Yamaha's MotoGP program has been it's been in shambles for years now. They recently swapped to a V4, and it's pretty impressive that they've made it as reasonably competitive as it is in such a short amount of time. But at the same time, I think that their beginner bike offerings, their race bike offerings like the R1, there's so much that they're doing that it just feels like they're leaving a lot on the table. And I will be totally honest, I recently rode the R7, I had the R9 last year. They're not really there with the new generation stuff. You ride the new products from Aprilia and Ducati, and there's so much more like fresh energy and thought in those motorcycles, right? Like you can tell by the way that they're designed, the way that they feel like fresh and new interpretations in motorcycling rather than someone clinging to the past and kind of like throwing some tech on something kind of old. Yamaha, it's very clear they focus super heavy on the CP3 products, on the MT-09, on the Tracer 9, on all that stuff. You know, the 890cc triple is like their crown jewel of their lineup. And, you know, while the R7 is their best-selling motorcycle, Yamaha's lineup has become sort of similar to Aprilia's. And I made a whole video talking about this where I think they have like maybe 3 or 4 years left until people start like kind of scratching their heads a little bit. Their beginner bike offerings are pretty weak. They do have something for everybody, but it's very narrow and focused. There is some niche stuff too, like they make the TW200 still, which is pretty cool. But I think that they could kind of expand a little bit more. Reliability, obviously totally solid with the Yamaha, similar to all the other big fours. There were a couple weird issues, like the MT-09 had that weird frame crack issue that wasn't super widely reported, but was definitely not great, but maybe people were just setting their wheelies down really hard and cracking the frames, although probably shouldn't do that from just a wheelie being set down too hard. Their pricing is really solid. Yamahas are reasonably affordable. The R7 packs decent bang for buck, but they're starting to become a you get what you pay for kind of brand. I think that Yamaha needs to adjust a few things, and I mentioned that in my deep dive video, but they do have certain models that are just like the absolute cream of the crop, which definitely raises them above some of these other brands. You know, you look at a Tenere 700, you look at a MT-09, like those are class-leading, genre-defining motorcycles that is very hard for anyone to even come close to compete with, you know? Like you look at a mid-capacity adventure bike and you look at a T7 and you say, why wouldn't you get a T7? Why wouldn't you just buy a T7? You look at a middleweight sport bike, naked bike, you're like, why wouldn't you get an MT-09? That is like the perfect bike. And I love that they're succeeding in that, but they're in danger of losing their way a little bit, in my opinion. So are they ascending or descending? It's hard to say. I think right now they're kind of just toeing the line, maybe descending a little bit. I'm not seeing any big energy or big movement on the upward swing, and it's difficult to say, right, because Yamaha's such a big company. It's hard to get a lot of energy and fresh ideas in something that's so big. It's difficult to move a giant cruise ship, you know, in the right direction versus an agile little jet ski or something, right? So there's always going to be giant corporate momentum with these Japanese brands. All right, podium places. Number 3 on today's list is Kawasaki. And again, I'm trying to buck the trend of you guys thinking that I'm super biased one way or the other way, but I really think Kawasaki is one of the best brands right now, no doubt about it. So First of all, they are easily the zaniest, craziest brand. They'll sell you hybrid motorcycles, supercharged inline fours. They have tiny inline fours like the ZX4. And that really is their claim to fame, is like, if you like inline fours, you don't want triples from Yamaha, you don't want twins from Ducati or Aprilia, you think inline fours are the proper engine configuration for a motorcycle, Kawasaki, I think, is really leading that charge. And that matters to a lot of people. In a world where everyone's saying the inline four is dying, dude, Kawasaki pumps out probably like 5 or 6 different variants of the inline four. The only twin that they have is their 180-degree cranks that they use in the 650 and the 500s, which are bread and butter bikes for them, by the way. That Ninja 500, they just print money on that thing over and over and over again. How many people show up to a dealership and get a Ninja 500 and start their motorcycling journey? Probably thousands every year, right? And that's really important to the industry, right? Like Kawasaki being the leading light for beginner bikes, for beginner sport bikes, is so great. I really, really love that. So the one reason that they didn't rank a little bit higher is that their reliability has kind of been a little suspect over the last few years. The ZX6R had that really infamous bottom end recall. The ZX10 has also had some issues as well. And you kind of get to the point where you start thinking, okay, like, is Kawasaki actually reliable? Like, you start really questioning that, which is crazy for a Japanese manufacturer, because everyone's just like, they're the most bulletproof things ever, they never break. But I think in a world where they're being forced to iterate and change at the speed of CFMOTO, at the speed of Aprilia, Ducati, and Kawasaki really wants to compete against those brands. They're not like Suzuki, where they're like, screw it, we're just gonna sell the same bike for 10 years, you buy it if you don't, whatever. Like, Kawasaki's always trying to update and change and take risks, right? I mean, and it doesn't always pay out. You make a hybrid motorcycle, you're not gonna sell very many of them. You make a tiny little inline four, maybe you don't produce as many, but they become a cult classic, right? And so they kind of have this outsized impact. And Kawasaki is an interesting company because their motorcycle division is really just like a, I wouldn't say an accounting error to them, but it's just like a fun side project for them, because what they really make money on is heavy industries, aerospace stuff, machine grade stuff, you know, marine equipment. I mean, they make all sorts of stuff, right? And the motorcycle stuff, I think for them is just kind of for fun. And you kind of get that energy from them. So, pretty reliable, some questions in recent years, super readily available, very affordable bikes for what they are. Yeah, they're doing pretty well. Some models, of course, are inexplicably expensive, like the Versys 1100 cost almost $20,000. That's crazy. They also make the H2, which is super expensive, but it should be super expensive because there's no motorcycle like the H2. That is our generation's Hayabusa. That is our Halo super fast motorcycle, the ultimate clout machine for Instagram and the internet in general. I think Kawasaki is neither super ascendant or descendant. I think they're just kind of toeing the line right now, and just there's nothing wrong with that. I think they could make some more interesting experiments rather than like hybrid tech, but I really love the fact that they try stuff. We gotta try stuff, you know. All right, second on the list today is a brand that I'm very fond of, but I didn't want to rate them number one because I really don't think they're number one. It is Triumph. Triumph has to be one of the most interesting brands right now in terms of how much they're changing, what they're trying to do. The fact that they've expanded their product offering as fast as they have without going bankrupt or without blowing up the company is extremely impressive. Let me paint you a picture. 6 or 7 years ago, Triumph didn't even have the 660 line. They didn't have their 400 line. They didn't have their enduro bike, their motocross bike. I think they had just launched the 900. I think they were getting started to revitalize the 1200s into certain things. The Street Triple needed a big boost. This company has executed so well, so effectively across so many different dimensions. It's pretty remarkable, right? And they're now selling 140,000 bikes a year, which is pretty serious movement. So they'll sell you pretty much anything you want now. You want an entry-level bike, you want an intermediate bike, you want their 3-cylinder roadsters at this point are almost absurd with how many different ones they offer. They got classic stuff like the Parallel Twins and the Bonnevilles. I mean, how many different Bonnevilles do they make? They make a Rocket 3, for God's sake. They make adventure bikes in small and big configurations, sport touring models. They've got a lot of different motorcycles. And the cool thing is that, the new stuff they're making, the 660s, 800s, they're all extremely conventional style motorcycles. So the reliability really has been there for a while now, which is pretty cool. Triumphs used to be plagued with the classic British bike problems of electronics and, stator issues and, random stuff going wrong. They don't really have that happen anymore, which is great. Triumph's also pretty accessible throughout most of the major metro areas. I think they're similar to Aprilia where, if you live near a major city, there's probably somebody who does something with Triumph. So you can get parts, you can get the motorcycle serviced, you can go and buy one if you want. I think they're pretty available. And in terms of affordability, I mean, Triumph has made remarkable strides with this. That's like their whole point now. I mean, the new Trident 800 is sub $10,000. The 400 series are all well within the price point of what people are expecting. They've gone from being this bespoke British exotica manufacturer to like a bread and butter mainstream manufacturer, and they've done that pretty successfully. So the bikes are interesting, they're cool, 3 cylinders are always cool. It's cool that you can buy a product that has more cylinders than just 2. I think a lot of people are tired of parallel twins, so Triumph represents this kind of like different way of thinking, and honestly, I think they are pretty ascendant right now. I think that they're definitely on the come up. They're always launching new products, they're always doing new stuff, and they're doing it effectively and well. They're not floundering or flubbing things up. We talked about Kawasaki launching new products, but sometimes getting that wrong, or making like the ZX6, but then it has bottom end issues, and then it just doesn't really work correctly. And all these brands kind of have some of those issues where you're like, you could be doing this different, could be doing that different. Triumph is really doing nearly everything correctly, and that's pretty impressive, I gotta say. I have a bit of a complicated relationship with the brand because I really love their older stuff. A lot of the newer stuff doesn't really appeal to me as much, but I understand why it's being built, and they're selling a ton of them, which, hey, you can't argue with the numbers there. All right, number 1, the best motorcycle manufacturer in 2026. Arguably the best motorcycle manufacturer for the last 50 years. It's a cop-out choice, and you may be surprised that I picked it, but it's Honda, baby. Honda is the best motorcycle manufacturer in 2026, without a doubt. Honda is the largest manufacturer of motorcycles in the world. They make I'm not even kidding, I think it's they ship 25 million units a year, which is just how is that even possible? That's so many motorcycles. And they make anything you want. They make mini motos, dirt bikes, entry-level bikes. They make intermediate bikes. They make cruisers, sport bikes, the Goldwing. I mean, the term full-line manufacturer came from Honda, and it came from their ambition and their pedigree and their legacy. And what I like a lot about Honda, especially in the last couple of years, is 2 things. Number 1, they've clearly understood that they need to make bikes that are exciting and interesting. The Hornet 750 was a complete revelation to me. I was blown away at Honda producing this type of motorcycle that I didn't think they could really make anymore. I thought they kind of just gave up on a lot of this stuff. And then the second part is that affordability angle, the angle that these motorcycles that they're making are priced extremely well. I mean, the bang for buck factor on a Hornet 750 is just absurd. You get a 90 horsepower 750, 755cc parallel twin with the 270 crank, e-clutch technology. And that's the other thing. Honda's making new technology now, trying new stuff. And that was always what they were best at, getting more people into the sport, trying to do new stuff, doing new things, and operating at a level of fit and finish and reliability that basically nobody else can even come close to, right? When you buy a Honda, the level of refinement of fit and finish and just the degree of reliability you're gonna get from that product is just, it's world class. And there's a reason why it's kind of like Honda and everybody else. For a long time, especially here on this channel, their product offerings were very, very sleepy to me. I thought that they were very boring, but I'm seeing on the horizon a new Honda that I just think Big Red is back in a big way, and everybody really needs to pay attention because they're setting the tone for motorcycling at this point. And they're also very reactive to what's happening in motorcycling too. CFMOTO comes out with cheaper products, Honda slashes their prices. Triumph tries to compete, Honda says, I don't think so, we're gonna make something else. They're teasing a boosted V3 motorcycle, completely zany, wacky stuff. So they're doing experiments, they have legacy, they have brand, they have a legendary build quality. It's very hard to say that Honda is not the best motorcycle manufacturer in the world. It's very hard to say that. So I think that they're firmly on the rise. I think that they're making super interesting products. I think that they are showing what can be done in motorcycling, being reactive to what's happening, trying new things. I can't really fault Honda for anything, and I'm super excited. And also, yeah, like a Honda, unlike we were talking about Aprilia or Ducati, it's like, oh, you gotta make sure you live in a major metro area. You can live anywhere in the world, and you could get a Honda, and somebody's gonna have parts for it somewhere around the corner, right? Like, there is a Honda dealership everywhere in the world. And that's the benefit of a motorcycle brand selling 25 million units a year or whatever. Like, you get all the benefits of scale, you get all those cost benefits as well, and they're still interesting and they're still cool products. Like, yeah, I think Honda has to be the best right now. Has to be the best. It's super cool to see them back. I feel like we're living through what people lived through, maybe not as crazy, but like in the 80s and the 90s when Honda made like, you know, V4 stuff and the Fireblade and everything else, and it just felt like they were invincible and like they were just cleaning up shop in MotoGP and, you know, racing. I think we're gonna see that as well with Honda, by the way, just as my prediction for like the late 2020s Grand Prix racing scene. You gotta look out for Honda, dude. You cannot discount this company, bro. Like, you cannot discount Honda. They are ridiculous and relentless and are always finding a way. So that's my spiel for today. It was a really long video, but I hope you enjoyed all my ranking for the motorcycle manufacturers in 2026. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Would you change the ranking in any way? I hope you appreciated today's video. Thanks so much for checking it out all the way to the end. I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.